Hey there, welcome to the Game Artist Podcast. My name is Ryan Kingsline. I am the founder of the Game Art Institute, where we train artists for the career of their lives. In this podcast, we interview amazing game artists to see what makes them tick and see how they got where they are today. So sit back, relax. I look forward to sharing their journey with you. All right. So, welcome Darren Tucker and everybody to the podcast. Darren, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Absolutely. We've got a crew here, and so if you're down, I'd love to get your feedback on a couple of people's work. So guys, make sure that you are posting links and stuff like that. If you have questions, let me know. But Darren, why don't we start with what you do? Because I know I was originally reaching out to you because I was looking at these things and I was thinking, I'd love to get you in to do a class, and I know you're a little busy, but why don't you walk through what you do? What does it mean, vehicle artist?
Right. So in the past, I've worked on kind of it's very kind of unusual the way I started, because the first type of vehicles I made professionally were actually spaceships.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of came into it in a very different way.
Awesome.
Although my day-to-day routine nowadays is sorry, is basically kind of we're looking more into the conceptual side of starting a new project and so on. So yeah, it's kind of everything's still up in the air.
What would be really good is just to understand a little bit about your background, like what got you into art. Is it possible for you to kind of start talking about that?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that'd be a good way for me to kind of get going, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm originally from the southwest of the UK, from a city called Bristol. Kind of did the kind of usual stuff you did kind of growing up.
Yeah.
Drew a lot, but completely kind of oblivious to where I was heading.
Right. Like many of us, right?
Yeah, of course.
Did you just like know you didn't want to do, was there something you knew you did not want to do?
Not so much. It was more of the fact that I was always heading towards an art kind of career. That was my goal, at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it yeah, I didn't know exactly about well, I didn't know exactly anything about the kind of world of video games and video game development and
Right.
so on. So I kind of went more of a kind of traditional route.
Like drawing or graphic design?
Kind of a bit of both, actually. I studied art and design in college
No, yeah.
and covered kind of various things like fine art, fashion design, 3D sculpture,
Yeah.
and kind of graphic design as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of gave me a relatively decent foundation to kind of building my art skills.
Was there somebody in your life that really supported this, or did you have a lot of resistance to studying this?
No resistance whatsoever, really.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, my family were very supportive, kind of just pushed me on my way and kind of just encouraged me to do well in what I wanted to do. So that's exactly what I did. I just kind of focused on the things I enjoy doing and kind of just go from there, be as creative as I can. Wasn't too sure in kind of what medium I wanted to kind of push towards. I had no idea I'd be going digital.
Yeah. When did you realize that games was an actual career, like you'd get paid money for this?
I think it was kind of near my near the end of college, actually. My lecturer came up to me and said, "Why don't you apply for a games course? Seems like something you kind of enjoy to do." Looking at my artwork that I was doing throughout the lessons and so on, because I would be drawing various characters and creating these various kind of just mad worlds and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So as soon as I found out about that, I kind of jumped at the chance, basically. So I started applying to various universities.
Yeah.
And luckily managed to get onto a game art course. There I kind of built up a basic understanding of 3D modeling principles, mainly for games. and we focus a lot on using 3ds Max.
So what was the first job like? Because had you done other work before you got in games, or were you mostly just a student, or?
Um, right, so just as I came up to graduating,
Yeah.
I started to check my CV out there, see kind of what kind of I, kind of gets me a response basically.
Uh-huh.
I started working at a airport simulator company, creating environments, building various airports like Heathrow and Dubai
Okay.
airports, and yeah, so that kind of it was a starting point, but not necessarily in the direction I wanted. But I was very happy at the time to have a job as a 3D artist.
Right.
But from there, I basically kind of I felt like I needed to move on and work on my portfolio
Right.
to then kind of push more towards achieving the dream of working in the games industry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I did for a while. I freelanced for about a year, and yeah, just kind of worked on various commissions for people, mostly kind of very minor 3D game art pieces, a lot of kind of visualization for kind of exhibitions and stuff like that, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I made a few mascots along the way, but it wasn't enough to kind of get my portfolio to the standard I kind of needed, really. So on the side of that, I also worked on kind of building my skills in ZBrush and kind of exploring substance
Mm-hmm.
and everything. You know, the whole thing really. There's so many tools out there that it's just trying to kind of understand what is kind of what what the game industry is using at the moment. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that makes sense. You just focused on what was essential, like what are they hiring for?
yeah, exactly. Just uh, yeah, seeing what they want,
Yeah.
what they kind of expected of industry professionals, I guess.
Well, you got a room full of students right now here with us live. What does the industry want or expect today? And I'd love your answer on that. And then I also want to get into, this the industry you're in, which is interesting because it's not character, it's not environment, and there's a whole genre um, here that I don't think, at least in my podcast, I don't pay enough attention to because it's always just character and environment. Um, but the vehicle is basically a character in this as well. But before we get into that, what is it that uh, what is it the industry is looking for today? Just from your perspective, just simple software, whatever. What are they looking for?
Okay, so at the moment we're looking for technical understanding of kind of the tools the industry uses at the moment. So it's a lot of 3ds Max, Maya,
Hmm.
ZBrush being the one of the best tools for anything organic, Substance for texturing. Um, we use a lot of Marmoset Toolbag free for baking as well and previewing meshes, which is yeah, a bunch of great tools. So a technical understanding of that, being able to show that you can effectively work well, and it's what we're mainly looking for though is just generally a solid portfolio of. Uh, it doesn't have to be many pieces, but polished, very polished, and kind of demonstrating, the correct use of topology. Uh, Whether or not, like for example, if you're a character artist, not only can you create, either photorealistic or stylized characters, but can you
Yeah.
rig as well? Are you familiar with that? Because it also helps when you actually do build these assets for games. You you can build it in a way that kind of helps the person who will then take it off your hands to then rig and so
Hmm.
on. But yeah, I mean, I guess you have to show that you kind of you're passionate about what you do as well. That enough kind of love and care gone into a piece. You've kind of focused on various bits of kind of uh, like what's an example I can kind of give? So say for example, you're working on an environment piece,
Yep.
and sorry, the color palette you choose to use
Yeah.
can kind of yeah, when you're thinking about color, what type of emotional triggers are you kind of going for? What
Sure.
do you want
Yeah.
your viewer to
Yeah.
kind of to get from this piece? Is it kind of a an ominous environment, and do your colors and the shapes you use
Yeah.
kind of complement that in a way? And you know,
I get
um,
it. I get it.
yeah.
So an understanding of shape language, an understanding of color, making sure you understand the rigging side of it. So we got a couple of questions here. Thomas is asking about the vehicles and the size and dealing with scale. He specifically asks, how do you approach the scale material wise? Do you use huge textures or multiple smaller ones and work with tiling?
Right. So we came about it, well, originally, say for
Hmm.
example, the fracture space ships, we uh, we did try to create the low and high poly meshes and break it down, but we
Hmm.
found that the sheer scale of them, it wasn't retaining the detail that
Right.
we need.
So how do you get the detail?
So we used a lot of kind of trim sheets
Yeah. Okay.
and custom normals. So
Hmm.
the trim sheets were basically uh, a lot of it was tiling textures in kind of strips, and we would kind of just map everything to that. So we could kind of get a lot of mileage out of a very kind of small resource, basically. So we
Hmm.
would have a hull material and kind of a metallic material, and what else would we have? We would have various lights and decals and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we break up the ships in various components and kind of map it to that. So then it will kind of keep the draw calls uh, relatively low, but give us the detail we need.
Hmm. Got it. So,
And
so in order to answer, Ryan's also asking a question about whether or not it's models or textures, and a lot of it is in the texture. Is that accurate?
oh yeah, definitely. We tend to be pretty broad when it comes to our the meshes themselves.
Hmm.
And you said it yourself, we apply a lot of the detail through the texture
Okay.
because we can do a lot with that. And not only that, we would have a layer of say the basic hull using trim sheets and so on.
Yeah.
So we have
Yeah.
various panel lines and so on. But then we will apply additional layers on top of that, like a very thin sort of almost like you would apply a decal, but uh, for for geometry itself.
Hmm.
So um, you could like so for example, we wanted additional kind of little cut-ins sort of around the kind of edges and so on. They wrap around, but then it's just additional plane. So that's how we would kind of deal with the sheer scale of these vehicles.
Wait, let me see if I understand. So, can you zoom in on that again real quick? And thanks for bringing up Max. I think this really makes things kind of clear. So, it's geometry, but it's really just a strip of geometry. It's not actually, you're just using that strip of geometry for the trim sheet, correct?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay. So we would have a base, and please, guys, this is, I think, I can feel it inside. This is a very important concept to communicate. So tell me if I'm just full of crap, or if you guys feel like this is an important concept. I think this is something that gets missed a lot, or at least it's hard for us as beginning artists to really wrap our head around, because I find trim sheets to be one of the hardest things for students to wrap their head around. All right, so if we zoom in on that element that we were just looking at, you you take these pieces and it looks like they're, so let's just focus on that actually. So you take this piece and then you just have like this strip of geometry that's really basically just a strip of UVs. Is this what goes into the game engine as well? Or do you
Uh,
bake this down further or what?
no, we would kind of export as is
Nice.
because
Okay.
yeah, well, this way we can keep everything together and yeah, it doesn't rely on any additional texture maps on top of what we already use.
Hmm.
Um,
So this is almost like your mid polygon, but it's, I mean, this is actually your low, you're making a low resolution mesh with the trim sheets inside of Max. Is that something that you do often so that you can visualize it and deal with all the 3D modeling?
yeah, I mean, for blocking out stuff, it's a great approach.
Okay. This is very quadded out. Is that a normal workflow for you, or do you get into triangles often?
We kind of a case by case basis using
Hmm.
triangles. If it kind of if two edges are kind of curving into each other,
Hmm.
we would normally have a triangle, but we do try to kind of keep everything quadded where we can. Um,
What's the value in your words for quads? Because I have this conversation with my students all the time, and everything in a game engine gets triangulated anyways. Um, so what's the value in your mind for quads?
hmm. Well, I guess anything with four vertices really are
Hmm.
connected because yeah, you can fall in the trap of having n-gons which won't shade correctly even after they're triangulated because the triangulation may not do a decent job
Yeah,
um, and may create pinch points in various
yeah,
sort of areas.
yeah. That makes sense. So for you, the primary value is avoiding the pinch points and avoiding the problematic edges that just don't soften well. Is that
Yeah, pretty
accurate?
much.
Okay. Now, if we're looking at this, how do you decide how many polygons are going to round an edge? So if we look at the front of this, and you know, anywhere where there's like a bevel, you can see there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's like 5 rows of polygons that decide a bevel, or the roundness of that piece. Can you see what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah,
So it's students are always wondering how many polygons we put in there. How do we decide how many polygons there versus if you go into smaller parts of your model, you have the polygonal faces much closer. So how do you decide how much resolution to put into a corner? Does that question make sense?
oh yeah, definitely. Right, so we would often kind of think about how much screen space it will use up, and well, kind of how big will it be on screen.
Yeah.
And then we kind of almost preview that just in Max out and kind of basically what we're trying to do is avoid any kind of faceted being shown on
Hmm.
screen,
Hmm.
any faceting
Okay.
being shown on screen. So yeah, I mean, you kind of get what it kind of needs. It's very particular to its use.
Yeah.
So if it's a hero asset, you would normally, um, uh, yeah, kind of curve it off as, yeah.
Well, you're at Wargaming. Wargaming's known for I think World of Tanks,
Yes. Yeah.
and then World. There's another one, and so is your job now is it basically making spaceships?
No, it's very different from
Mhm.
this. Uh, Although there's not much I can really say on it at the moment
Okay, fair
until
enough.
we announce what we're doing. But it's a kind of it's a completely new project,
Uh-huh.
and it's going to be something very different to what World of Tanks currently have in their portfolio.
Okay, got it. All right, so then, so we don't get you in trouble, we'll gently swap out of that. We had a question about using these trim sheets. Do you have an example of the trim sheet? Like, can you show us the trim sheet itself that you use?
I can, yes. I will just have a look. So I should be able to just pop it up here on.
Mhm.
Hopefully this doesn't take too long. Okay, so for the hull, it's very basic. We have kind of very open area,
Mhm.
which we map to cover kind of big surface areas, and then
Okay.
something a little more kind of broken up. I don't know if you can see
I
that.
can't see that very well. That's very light. Oh yeah. Okay, now I can see it.
I do have.
That's interesting. That is very light. So you work with very light surfaces like this then, or texture, sorry. I shouldn't say
Uh,
light because this is dark. I mean the contrast is low.
yeah, I mean, if it's covering a lot of the surface area, we don't want. Well, we want to minimize the amount of noise
Hmm.
that is coming through,
Hmm.
and then kind of any additional details we've been using, kind of the trim sheets, which we kind of crop out parts. Oh god, it's just frozen up on me.
Mm.
So yeah, so basically, we will have normally the map will be kind of separated into very minor details,
Yeah.
which gets applied on top.
Okay, great. So if you select that one strip that we were looking at, where's the UVs for that? Oh,
Well, this UV is kind of stretched out
yep.
because it's such a minor detail
Yeah.
that we can afford to just kind of not worry about text density and stuff like that.
Hmm. So in the UV map, what section is that applied to?
This is just up on the top left. This isn't the most up-to-date map, unfortunately. So
Sure.
there would be more pieces kind of covering the top.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and then we just kind of map to what we need to kind of pull through the details we kind of want.
Okay, got it. So if we're answering Joey's question, do you have all the pieces already made in a library and you bash them together?
Uh, we, we do a lot of kit bashing, but that
Yeah.
normally comes from once we've completed building a couple of vehicles.
Yeah.
We can then kind of take that apart, reuse parts, and kind of just kind of expand on the essentially the library that comes from having multiple completed assets.
Hmm. Okay.
But yeah, from time to time, if we have some downtime without many tasks, we will jump in and kind of model slightly more bespoke pieces. Yeah.
Okay. Christian's got a good question for you here. He's saying, hey, Darren, on top of great modeling and texture in your portfolio also shows a solid sense of design. For those of us that are more novice or entirely new to principles of design, can you suggest any good resources to learn?
Right. So I look at all sorts of work that's being released on places like ArtStation,
Hmm.
and kind of study kind of work of artists that I admire. And then there's also the kind of going out in the world, taking photo reference of kind of things you're interested in that relates to the sort of things that you make, kind of deconstruct how the details are kind of distributed and so on.
Hmm.
There's well, again, you can go online, you can kind of see all sorts of random things. Sorry.
Yeah, but how, I've done hard surface. A long time ago, I started, I'm a traditional sculptor, so I learned organic is like my home. But I started doing some hard surface a long, long time ago, and that shit is hard. It's like there's a whole language. There's an anatomy to hard surface, isn't there?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So
Um,
what did you do to learn that? Because that's not, I mean, it's not everybody I talk to says go look at some reference and all that. And I'm like, I look at reference all the time. Still, there's an element that people are doing that, I wasn't necessarily doing in the beginning. So if we were to take that a step further, like what do you look for or look at when you look at the reference? Because I when I look at your work, I'm like, you've got multiple types of fins and venting, and you have all of these elements. Does that make sense or no?
yeah, definitely. Um, it's a tricky one, really. It's a
Hmm.
lot of experimentation, and kind of just building up various primitives and so on. Looking at a lot of real world tech and just trying to kind of focus on how does it function? What are the kind of pivoting points? And um, yeah, it's a tricky thing to answer. I mean, for the ships on my portfolio, actually, we looked at a lot of kind of military esque vehicles, a lot of kind of submarines.
Hmm.
So everything's quite uh, fairly curved, almost organic, right? But it's
Mm,
hard surface. It's
that
uh,
makes sense.
yeah.
Hmm. Is there, do you remember a particular submarine that really was impactful or helpful? I know that might be a weird question, but I'm asking
It's
because,
not a
like,
weird
if,
question, but not really. I mean, we looked at multiple things, and we're kind of just um, we're kind of just going through this and doing things at kind of quite a rapid pace.
yeah.
So, because I mean, each ship would take uh, about 3 to 5 weeks to put together
Hmm.
from scratch. However, we did a kind of a rework stage where we would have to go through and kind of rebuild them, optimize them,
Yeah.
and uh, kind of implement the kind of trim sheet uh, texturing pass that we did.
Okay. Is the trim sheet, so if we were to walk through process real quick, I just want to sketch out something real fast for these guys. You do a, uh, you do a, you do a bit of a kit bash, a bit of a block in slash kit bash, right? So if we went back to 3ds Max, what would be the first stage?
So the first stage would be kind of just blocking out the basic shape. So say for
This.
example, take this. What's my layers? Right. So we have a. Let's have a look.
Oh, cool.
Um, oh, apologies for that. Seems we've lost. Oh, I don't know.
That's okay. I think I get a great sense of it from there. But
Okay, so yeah, we chuck down various primitives and just hmm, apologies, guys. This is,
there we go.
okay,
That's your
so
block in.
starts
Those
out
those,
yeah,
those arms.
very copy. Kind of gives me an example of kind of what I'm going for,
Hmm.
so on, and then I kind of just build it up piece by piece, basically, just kind of seeing what kind of works with the overall shape. Does it
Yeah.
look like it um, function properly? Uh, yeah.
And are you building like, are you reusing these pieces? And it's a little tough of a question I'm trying to ask. But the biggest issue I find with people learning to do this is just trying to learn, like, what's a piston, what's this, like, you've got a lot of parts down in that foot. Like, if we were to just focus on that one of those feet, so to speak, or whatnot, there's like there's all these parts, pistons, gears, swivels, like there's a whole language I'm not 100% comfortable with.
Yeah, it's again, a lot of it kind of it's not exactly accurate in the way it will, like, if say for example you were to build this in real life, you probably build it in a very different way, right?
Hmm.
But again, being games, you can kind of get away with a bit of creative freedom, so you don't necessarily have to stick to uh, kind of I don't know, more kind of CAD sort of ways of building things. That makes sense.
Hmm. Totally does. You know, and I
Mm,
think you can deal with interpenetration, and it needs to look, sexy. So from that kind of perspective, like, what is it that you think is more important than CAD functionality? Like, what are the things that you try to emphasize in your designs?
um, so yeah, it's a tough one. Hmm.
I had this interesting moment when early in my career when I was teaching that I thought was really, like, it's lived with me for a long time. I was teaching Carlos Fuentes ZBrush. I don't know if you know Carlos Fuentes, but he's like the godfather of creature concept design.
Okay.
And he's been in the industry for like 20 plus years. He was old school traditional, and he's done everything from Aliens to The Thing to, a bunch of stuff. And I'm in there and I'm teaching him ZBrush, and I'm doing this sculpt to teach, and I'm like teaching the Godfather. Like, this guy's understanding of anatomy is almost unparalleled. I'm teaching him this, and I'm up front. And I'm demonstrating ZBrush, and my sculpt sucks. And I'm like, I'm embarrassed, and I'm at ILM, and it's my first job, and I'm teaching this, and I'm not quite sure what's going on or what's wrong or any of that stuff. And Carlos said something that, like, stuck with me forever. And he said, it's good that you can fail, because that means it's an art. That's what makes it an art. It's not just like rote and, everything is, you just put down the numbers. So as you're talking, it just made me think about that, because, this is an art. It doesn't mean that you have to be able to explain it,
Yeah,
but
I guess so.
you create it. So, if you don't know the words, I mean, that's fine to me, because, this is an art. I can see you can produce the art. I think everybody here can see you can produce the art. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we have the words for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty perfect for yeah.
Yeah. And
Uh,
the words are the words, whatever they are. But if you were to look at somebody's work, is there something that you like to see, something that inspires you when you look at other people's work and you're like, oh, I really like that, whatever that is.
I guess I'd say when I come across a piece I admire, it's
Hmm.
usually something that it's kind of testing out different things in it. Well, so something that you wouldn't necessarily put together,
Yeah.
something that kind of juxtaposes, almost creates quite a contrast between. So,
Hmm.
say for example, you have a giant holding a teddy bear. It's
Right.
very eye-catching because it's not something you kind of expect.
Yeah.
So pieces like that, for example, really kind of draw my eye, and it creates a kind of narrative.
Yeah.
Um, and it doesn't matter what that narrative is, it's because whoever's looking at the piece will kind of make that up in their head.
Yeah, totally.
Um,
I think that's a
Yeah.
great point, and I've seen a couple of art books recently, mech art books. I forget. I think Fausto did an art book recently too. Um, and I think story is that thing. I mean, do you find story to be really important when you're designing and creating these?
Oh, narrative behind your piece is kind of what drives the piece.
Yeah.
It gives you the influences you need to create something that people can kind of relate to and kind of continue to look in and discover, uh, yeah, sort of interesting kind of elements that complement, well, like yeah, kind of add to the overall story of that piece. So
Sure.
narrative is a huge thing. Um,
If we were to look at your portfolio again over there, when you were approaching these, I'd love to just hear a little bit about how narrative fits into this, because I actually, for some reason, I remember story coming up in you and I's conversation, and it might have been one of the students that was looking at this, and they were like, every image is telling a story. Like if we were to look at the third one from the left, yeah, Catalyst. I mean, that's not. I mean, you got a whole bunch of stuff going on there.
yeah, I mean, when I kind of began to put this piece together,
Yeah.
uh, we were working with the designers to kind of come up with sort of okay, so basically all of these environments that I was making for a fractal space, we had a kind of unique game mode released with this new map.
Yeah.
And the game mode for this map in particular, it we had this kind of catalyst ship in the center, and you had to kind of surround it to capture it, to kind of nudge it towards your enemy base. So we wanted something that was quite what was the word I used? Kind of disquieting,
Mm-hmm.
sort of a sense of uneasiness. And so I kind of went with this kind of a green, um, kind of green and yellow kind of color palette
Yeah.
to kind of, yeah, try to get that feeling across.
That's great. So simple color palette, which is what you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, definitely. I find that when thinking about color, I kind of think of sets of threes. So you have your primary. It's something that kind of encompasses most of the piece, and then you have your kind of complementary colors to kind of get pieces to yeah to make pieces stand out.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of yeah capture your eye so that you kind of take notice of these interesting visual elements.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and stuff like that, I guess.
That's really cool. So if we were to go back to the main page, then you've chosen several, like there are several different color combinations. If we look at the second one, blue and red.
So yeah, this was the we were creating a new conquest map. So there would
Mm.
be kind of two sectors left and right. You have a home base each, and then there was this kind of gamma central kind of area, which is pivotal to kind of winning the game.
Mm.
So we wanted something that looked just completely dangerous, really, and kind of very military-esque in space.
Yeah.
So yeah, we went for the kind of red and blues because it's the warm colors kind of gave it that kind of a kind of sense of um, hmm, well, I guess yeah, the sense of danger and so on.
Yeah, I was thinking, it's red, color of Mars, God of War. It definitely has conquest written all over it. Red lights, which is danger lights. So that's cool. Can we go back to your main art, the other art station? Because I think there was one more permutation, and I guess that's the thing that's very fascinating. So the fourth one and the first one, you have two more really strong color color palettes here. So it's like the fifth, is it the fifth one? Yeah, it's the fifth one where it's blue.
Right, gotcha.
That the other one, the ice planet. I think it's an ice planet. Yeah,
I see.
yeah. What is your focus here? Like when you're building and designing this, what's this, how how are you approaching narrative? What's the process?
For this one, it was bit of a tricky one because we never really had a narrative put in place.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, there were elements like a huge kind of central asteroid, which kind of these spacefarers are mining and so on. But
Yeah,
it was kind of mainly just to have something that kind of something you didn't really expect when flying around in a space game, right? It
right.
was just kind of ice everywhere. Well, I guess like yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's really cool. Can we see the first one too? The first image?
sure.
Was there a narrative for this? Because I'm seeing organic shapes like trees almost.
Yeah, so basically, here we had various. Well, the narrative behind it was an infection kind of eating away uh, at this kind of giant asteroid. We have these kind of stations which were kind of investigating and mining and so on, kind of being trapped.
Hmm.
Like the asteroid is almost alive in a way, and kind of is just kind of grasping at everything it can.
Hmm.
And and so we went with a lot of kind of colors that kind of you know complemented the
The
kind of
virus theme.
the infectious nature of yeah.
Okay, great. All right, my friend, thank you so much for sharing that. Hold on, let me open this up and see. All right, guys, we're heading up on time. Any more questions? Thomas is asking any tips for learning hard surface topology and edge flow in particular.
Um, right. It's hmm. I'll tell you what.
Mhm.
I can't find the words for it right now.
Yeah,
However, it would be good if um, if you could pass on my email, and then I
sure.
can get back to everybody properly and answer their questions in a more efficient manner.
Yeah, we can just throw, we
If
can,
that helps us all.
sorry, didn't mean to
If,
interrupt.
if that helps us all.
Yeah, totally. I'll ask Susan to add you into our community, and then you can just take the messages as you want in there.
Cool. Okay. It's probably a slightly better format for me, it seems.
Okay. I think a very important part of that too is, you're an artist, right? And you're a visual artist, and you create beautiful work. So that's the important thing. And that's the thing that I think we really, really wanted to kind of learn here. Not necessarily some verbal description of all of that. Edison, I agree. Edison says some artists cannot explain the technicals, which I agree. Um,
Exactly
I
right.
I also think, because I've been on the teaching side of it so long, I actually think it's a benefit when you can't explain, um, because you kill a thing by explaining a thing, which I know as a teacher. Like I try to not have my students know too much and just work at the cusp of doing, which is different.
Yeah,
Um,
I think with a lot of what I do, I
mhm.
am kind of just feeling it out. I'm
Yeah,
not necessarily thinking too in depth. So yeah, you're exactly right there.
cool. All right, well, I'm looking forward to learning more about how you do the trim sheets, because I actually have not seen anybody do a spaceship and do trim sheets, um, and really explain it. It's actually one of the first times I've seen it pulled out like that, even though I'm sure it's common practice. It's just not. talked about much. So that was really cool to see.
Cool.
All right. Okay, it looks like we've got all the questions answered, guys. So if you got more, Darren has suggested he'll help inside the community or answer questions inside the community. Sorry, not to help.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you, folks. All right, Darren, thanks for taking the time, my friend.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much.
All right, take care. Bye.
All right. So I want to thank you so much for being here, for taking the time, and for listening to this podcast. And I want to ask a couple of things from you. Number one, make sure you leave a comment or you rate this on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever it is that you're getting this. That's going to make a big difference in helping us get the word out and get people to know who we are. All right. The other thing is I want to make sure you know where to find us. So you can head over to www.gameartinstitute.com, where you can learn about our flagship program, which is the Game Artist Bootcamp. This is designed for those who are really looking to move the needle on their career and really lock in that job. You may have gone to school and learned a bunch, maybe haven't learned a bunch. But at the Game Art Institute, the primary focus we have is the very specific industry skills, the triggers that you really need to hit in that job interview. What are the specific things that they're looking for? That's what we're going to be training you on. We're taking applications right now for environment artists and for character artists. So make sure you head over to www.gameartinstitute.com and apply today. That way we can have that conversation, make sure this is a fit for you, make sure that you're a fit for it, and if everything is perfect, then we will sign you up for that right away and get you into your training and start moving the needle on your career. All right? Thank you so much again for being here. Take care. Have an amazing day.